I've been all around the world, 25 countries to be exact. And every country I've ever set foot in, I've had a powerful experience. But I'm going to tell you about one that had an even bigger impact on me than most others. And that was New Zealand. This past winter break, I had the amazing blessing of going to Australia and New Zealand. But unfortunately, this TED Talk isn't about koalas or kiwis. It's about the people of New Zealand. I don't know how many of you have been to New Zealand, but everyone there is ridiculously nice. People on the street greet you with a radiant smile. Everyone's always checking in on you, whether it's at a restaurant or in the hotel. And as Americans, we were kind of shocked. New Zealand drives on the other side of the road. So when we took our rental car, it took a little bit of time to get used to it. And my dad didn't quite really figure it out. So we ended up making a fairly big mistake in traffic. In a city called Hamilton, we stopped at a turn. And New Zealand's advanced technology has floor signals that detect when a car is there. We parked right behind the floor signal for 15 minutes, wondering why the light wasn't turning green. All of a sudden, we heard knocking on our door. And my dad looked to the side and said, "Oh no, someone's going to talk to us." And we lowered our window, and this guy smiles and goes, "Hi, how are yous? You mind moving up a little bit to the turn signal? We've been here for like 15 minutes and I have to get to work. It'd be great if you could move a little bit forward. Cheers." We were stunned, to say the least. We live in Miami. If we held up someone from work for 15 minutes, I don't even want to think of what would have been there. Middle fingers, guns, words that I don't even want to hear. To think that the guy's reaction was cheers, and to greet us with a smile and ask if we needed help, I was blown away. It's no wonder that New Zealand's one of the happiest countries on earth. Everyone there is so nice. Personally, I think this ties back to something called the fundamental attribution error, something that a psychology teacher at my school, Mr. Timko, taught me. It's a term coined by a psychologist known as Lee Ross in 1977. Basically, what this term seems to establish is that actions aren't necessarily because of someone's character, but rather because of a certain situation. That man in New Zealand didn't assume that we were holding up the traffic line because we wanted him to be late to work, but rather because we had no idea what was going on, which was in fact the case. He was not rude to us, and he greeted us with an open mind. Take a scenario. You're at an airport. Someone pushes you to the side at TSA, shoves their bag in front of you. You don't really do anything because you assume that they're late for their flight. I mean, why else would someone be so excited for TSA? But if someone does the same thing to you at a supermarket, you would get upset. You would verbalize your upsetness, most likely. Why? Because you lack the context. You don't know if they have to get to the hospital in 10 minutes to visit their sick friend, or if they really have to be somewhere, or even if they're just skipping the line because they have a child alone in the car that's waiting for them. But instead, we're likely to assume that the reason they skipped in front of us is because they're selfish and don't want to wait in line. We attribute their mistake to their personality rather to the circumstance. Think about that. If we all began attributing things not to people's personalities and character, but rather to the situations people are in, we would build a lot more empathy in today's world, and we would all be in a better place. When you're late for something, or when you make a mistake, your first instinct is to try to justify it. Oh, this happened. Oh, that happened. Oh, I was there. Why? Because you assume that people are going to reprimand you for it. You assume that people are going to be mad at you. You assume that if you're late, people are going to think of you as not caring about what you were late to. You assume that if you accidentally snub someone, they're going to assume that you don't care about them, or you're too cool to give them the light of day, when instead you could have been stressed out, or you were on a phone call with your mom. Something that they don't know, but instead they're likely to assume that you did that out of your own character as opposed to the situation. Are we understanding where I'm going here? If we all built this kind of empathy in today's world, if we all understood to not tie back people's actions to their personality but their circumstance, everyone would be happier. I'm going to offer a counterexample. I was in Dallas on my connecting flight to Australia. And we got an Uber driver who was deaf. When we walked in the car, we saw on the back of the driver's seat a paper that said, "Hello, I am deaf. Please type anything on your phone that you need to communicate with me." So me and my parents sat down, and I began napping. My parents began talking, when all of a sudden, we heard the car come to a screech. The lights in the crosswalk had began beeping, and a man began to cross. Our driver had not heard the lights beeping, so she almost ran over the guy. But she stopped the car right before, and the guy banged on the hood, showed her the middle finger, and began yelling at her. And she was so confused she didn't understand, and she signaled that she couldn't hear. And the man began getting even angrier, showed her the middle finger again, cursed her out, went like that, and then walked away. And she put her head down and continued driving. Do you think that if he had known that the reason she didn't stop was because she was deaf and didn't hear the signal, maybe he would have likely been a little bit more lenient and likely not have done what he did? But instead, he assumed that she had gone because she was in a rush and she didn't want to let the pedestrian cross, not that she couldn't hear and that it was something out of her control. People like that in the world, it's not their fault. Our society ingrains this robotic-like mindset where we're all held to these expectations, we're expected to act a certain way, and we don't stop and think that everything isn't on a surface level. Everything has a layer below it. People aren't always what they seem. Sometimes someone may do something and it might upset you. And granted, some actions are not justifiable, and some actions are tied to character. But when you're meeting a stranger or someone you are not that close with, and they do something that upsets you slightly, give them a second shot. Understand that maybe it wasn't their character, but rather the circumstance and situation they're in. Because together, with all that understanding, we can build greater empathy and make a world happier, make our world lighter, in a better mood, and we would all be like New Zealand, a shining country filled with amazing people that people are going to be giving TED Talks about.